Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Max and Rosie.
Hi.
And we are back for another episode. And today we went ahead and did a tea tasting experience over at Tea and Whisk in Las Vegas. And it was very interesting and enlightening. I feel like we learned a lot and experienced a lot, and we wanted to chat about it.
Yeah. So the name of the place is Tea and Whisk, and it's in the Chinatown area here in Las Vegas off of Spring Mountain. Once we go into the establishment, it's a little off-putting that their inventory is like dead center in their serving space.
I thought we weren't going to talk about that.
No, we gotta tell them. We gotta tell him.
This is no offense at all to Mr. Leo. We appreciate you. We think you're a brilliant tea master. However, we do recommend that you try to make the space for the tea tasting a little bit more inviting, a little bit less cluttered, a little more feng shui and zen, shall we say, because really it looks like a warehouse. And it might indeed be a warehouse. He might do most of his business online where he's selling tea, mostly over the internet, and customers that walk in or get a tasting are really his secondary business. However, to us, it did feel like walking into a warehouse. There were boxes absolutely everywhere and a lot of clutter, which was a little bit off-putting at first, but once we sat down and got into the tasting, everything melted away except for our tea and our conversation, which was nice.
Which is absolutely the truth. Like Max is hitting the nail on the head. You definitely don't want to be discouraged by that first impression. Once you sit down at the actual tasting table, you just become completely engulfed in the experience. Kind of like we were there and we definitely were like here in Las Vegas, but I felt like we were away, if that makes sense. Nothing supernatural happened, or maybe it did, but we'll save that for a little bit later in the podcast. But it just felt very different, like we teleported in some kind of way, maybe just through his storytelling and because we knew a little bit about him just in general before we actually got into the tea tasting. He is a tea master and he travels all around China to get specialty teas. So we knew that once we got to the tasting that we were going to get a very well-rounded experience. We were going to get firsthand knowledge of someone who has ventured out and handpicked tea. So that's important, which I did not realize how important it is until we actually got to the tasting. This entire time I thought that chamomile was tea, and it's not. But yeah. So
it's an herbal infusion, apparently.
Yeah, herbal infusion.
Oh, and by the way, the table that we sat at is very cool. It's a giant, very old-looking, handmade wooden table, and it has a giant moat in the middle of it, and then there's an island in the middle of that moat where you actually pour out your tea when you're done drinking your tea. If there's a little bit of leftover leaves at the bottom, you just pour it out in the middle, and there's a bowl to catch it, and there's all sorts of little animal figurines and other types of figurines around that are interesting to look at. And something funny he does is, sometimes when you brew tea, you don't actually taste the first brew. The first brew is to just warm up the leaves and you actually pour that out. So he pours it out on some of his little figurines and gives them a little nice warm tea bath.
Yeah, that was sweet.
So the first thing he did to start us off was he gave us normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill tea just to kind of gauge where we were. He didn't really want to tell us much before we started. He just wanted to jump into the experience and be like, see, this is the difference. So the first thing we had was just a general white tea that you could get, anywhere, just normal, probably store-bought white tea. And I thought it was good. I actually liked it. It had a lot of flavor, and I don't know hardly anything at all about tea. I don't know if you do, Rosie. Did you know a lot about tea before this?
Nothing. I thought that I did just because I would go to Smith and purchase Lipton and chamomile and sleepy time tea. And because I drink tea every day, I definitely never felt like a connoisseur, but I always felt like someone who appreciated tea. But no, I don't think so. Okay. Not after this experience.
So I liked the first tea. Did you like it at first?
At first I did. Honestly, I did.
It tasted fine. It tasted like normal, decent tea. By the way, we learned that it's blasphemy to put sweetener or sugar in your tea. That's like an offense to good tea. Good tea, you're just supposed to drink it plain.
Who knew that? I had no idea.
Yeah, so that's the first thing he did. And then what he did is, I think he might have given us the most expensive tea directly after that. So the first thing he gave us, like I said, was a generic over-the-counter store-bought white tea. And then he gave us Silver Needle white tea sourced from Master Wang in China, who's this eccentric, energetic lady who cares nothing about anything else except for tea and is just completely dedicated and devoted and passionate about tea. And it's $100 an ounce silver needle authentic Chinese tea. And I first tasted it and I was like, oh, well, this is mild. Where's all the flavor? There's barely any flavor to it. It was just very kind of smooth and mild and light. And at first I was like, I actually preferred the first tea. He asked you, he didn't tell us anything about the teas. He was just like, which one did you prefer? And I was like, oh, I preferred the first one, I think, because it had more flavor. And this is me being a novice tea drinker. And then he says, tea drinking is not about the flavor. It's about so many other things. Most importantly, it's how it makes you feel. It's also about the smoothness of it. It's also about the hydrating factor. Does it feel like it dries you out, or does it feel like it hydrates you? Does it feel oily, or does it feel barren? And then when he started saying that, I started to notice, oh my gosh, because we actually went back and forth a couple times between the first generic tea and the expensive silver needle tea, and you realize that the generic tea actually dries out your mouth. When you drink it, it feels like it's sucking the moisture out of your tongue and cheeks. And then the other tea felt like a lubricant. It felt very smooth, and it felt like it was hydrating you and lubricating you. And I noticed that, and I was like, oh, that's very interesting. What was your experience with the first two teas?
Oh, absolutely the same. Like initially, I thought that generic white tea was great. It is what we get in the store. It's what we get if we go to a restaurant. It's not high quality, not high end. And then he gave us a tea that's $100 an ounce, and it's just absolutely superb. It's no comparison like whatsoever. It was smooth, silky on the tongue because of the oils. It had a very soft aroma.
Yes.
It had a soft color, and I think for people who are used to drinking store-bought tea, they're looking for a darker hue.
Yes.
So initially that might be a turnoff, like, okay, it's not going to be as strong. Because most of us, like, we want that caffeine fix if we're drinking, caffeine. That's something else too. He said every tea has caffeine.
Yes.
So if you're getting something that's decaf or, caffeine free, it's probably not tea.
Yes. And something that he said that was interesting is he said, yeah, I'll give very expensive tea to newcomers and they'll say, what's wrong with this tea? It's not strong. Your tea is weak. And that's because good tea doesn't necessarily have to have a very intense, pungent flavor. It's more about how it makes you feel. Is it hydrating you? Is the texture right? So did you prefer the first tea right away, or were you confused like me where I actually preferred the store-bought white tea because it had more flavor to it and I thought that's what we were doing?
Exactly. I felt the absolute same. And I think there was one other couple that was there with us, and everybody was like, oh no, the first tea, because of the conditioning. He pointed that out too, like the difference between Western and Eastern culture and how we view tea. So most of us are probably drinking tea and coffee just as a social exchange. You want to go grab some coffee? You want to go grab some tea?
Or a caffeine fix.
Or a caffeine fix, certainly me. And in the Eastern cultures, that's not necessarily the case. It's a part of their culture and tradition. And he did say that when you were drinking tea, you were drinking someone's culture. Because every single tea that he brings in to his shop comes from a particular province in China. Yeah. And so that particular province, they only drink that tea that's associated with their land.
Right.
So they are very proud of that.
Yes.
He referred to the plants as trees, which
yes.
I thought was very interesting. So he's like, these trees can be, and I was like, tree or a plant? He's like, what's the difference?
He did call them trees, and he did say some of them can get up to 1,000 years old. And usually, unless they're on death's door, the older the tree, the better. And I just wanted to expand on what Rosie just said, how each province takes pride in their tea leaves and their brews that they make. I would consider it similar to sports teams in America, that there's actually this rivalry between these different provinces and towns where they say our tea is the best and all those other guys' tea is whack. We have the best tea. They don't know what tea is. We have real tea here in our province. And it's like a friendly, competitive environment between the tea farms.
Yes. So the next tea that we had was green tea, which was my favorite. We went home with a bag of that.
Tell us about the green tea and how that made you feel, Rosie.
I enjoyed it. I like the green tea, I think, especially well because of how it made me feel. I think that's a major takeaway from Leo's session. He said, don't pay attention to how it looks and do not pay attention to how it tastes. How it tastes has everything to do with your personal preference. How does it make you feel? And when I sipped this particular green tea, I felt like I was there. I felt like I was somewhere in a wooded area, someplace that had grass. I felt like I was in nature and I could really connect. And I liked the way it made me feel. Had a good energy to it. And I connected with that tea most of all. They all were very good, very delicious. But the green tea, it spoke to me. And he said, that's what you want. You want it to speak to you. It's a living entity. And I've never thought of tea in that way, ever. So you're really like drinking the bloodline of an area, of a people. And that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, the green tea was nice. My favorite, however, was actually that first white tea, the Silver Needle. Really did it for me, just the smoothness, the creaminess of it. And the green tea was also very good. What was the next one?
The next one that we had was the Oolong tea. This one had a little woody taste.
Yeah, this Oolong, I want to say, was probably the strongest, most intense taste of all of them. And to me, it tasted like charcoal, like in a way, like it felt like after a fire kind of feeling and vibe, and kind of this robust kind of burnt taste. Not like bad burnt, but just very strong and like charcoal-y is the only way I can describe it. And I might be butchering my words here. And, you know, like we said, we're tea novices here, but we're just kind of trying to pull at words out of the ether that describe our feeling. Wasn't necessarily one of my favorites. It was just too dark. It kind of had that dark flavor to it, especially compared to the Silver Needle white tea, which was very light and breezy. This was very dark and earthy and brown, black tones to it. I think it was the darkest tea visually as well that we drank. What were your thoughts on the Oolong?
Pretty much the same. Wasn't a fan favorite. Appreciate it being introduced. Even when we go out to a restaurant, I never really order Oolong. I usually order jasmine or green. So it's not my favorite. And then also, I will say with some of them, and this is what Leo pointed out, it depends on how long you brew it. The longer that the tea leaves steep, the greater the chance of catching that bitterness. So without the sugar to kind of like counterbalance it, you are just tasting that tea full throttle at its very best and its very worst. And so Leo said it's super important to taste the tea at its worst, because then you can tell, number one, how does it feel? Is it speaking to you still? If in its worst case, if it doesn't, then it's probably not the tea for you.
Right. That was fascinating that he said that if you cook tea perfectly, you actually don't learn that specific type of tea as well. What you need to do is undercook it sometimes, overcook it sometimes, cook it just right sometimes, and then you learn the spectrum of that tea and all the different ways that it can taste and that it can make you feel. And then that's how you learn, is this tea really for me? And he used to have timers and stuff, but now he just does it all by feel. And the time that you leave the water in with the tea leaves is very important for the flavor and the experience.
The next tea we tried was the red tea, and I did enjoy this one. We didn't go home with a bag. Perhaps the next time that we're there, we can pick some up. I did like it. To me, it was a little sweet. The young lady that was in the session with us, she purchased some tea, I think, down the street, still on Spring Mountain. And she told Leo, yours is better. So I think she probably was picking up. It wasn't floral, but it was sweet. To me, it was a little sweet.
Yeah, it's almost hard to remember because we tried so many teas now and it was earlier in the day. But I think I do remember the red tea being perhaps my second favorite. And maybe it was a bit floral. You think it wasn't floral? It might have been a little bit to me. I'm trying to find the words to describe it, but it was a little bit more intense than the white tea, but it still had a nice, pleasant flavor and feeling from my perspective.
I think because the other teas had more of a bitterness. Now, see, the other teas we drank more frequently. He brewed a lot. That's something else too. Some of these teas will only give you like 6 to 8 cups, and then others can give you 20 cups. So like the tea that we're going to review next gives 20 cups. Red tea may only give 6 to 8 cups. Green tea, 4 to 6 cups. So on and so forth. So I feel like the white tea we probably drank the most of, but he definitely kept going around. We had multiple sips. The only thing I can say about the red tea to me is sweet. I did not detect a floral taste. I usually don't prefer it. I don't care for a flowery taste in my drink. This was it was pleasant.
Let's go off what Rosie says then, because I might be not remembering exactly correctly. That one wasn't as memorable as some of the other ones. Like this next one we're about to discuss was very memorable.
This is the fermented tea?
Fermented tea. Yes. So this one, they say they carry the tea leaves in a backpack, let it rain on the tea leaves, then let it dry out in the sun in their backpack, and they let it happen a few times so that it starts to get moldy and fermented, and it tastes way different than all the other teas. It is like a completely different experience that I'm honestly not the biggest fan of. It's not my favorite flavor. It almost reminded me of the ocean. I mean, I almost said the word fishy, and then he said, oh, well, the cheaper ones are considered fishy, but not mine. And maybe that's true, but it just kind of reminded me of the ocean and or fishy, and it tasted very different than all the other teas. It's supposed to be really good for your stomach and digestion, but I don't know. It definitely reminded me of something that I've tasted before, and I tried to put my finger on it. I wonder if it's maybe like a miso soup that it reminded me of, something like that you would get at a sushi restaurant as an appetizer. But yeah, it wasn't my cup of tea. Puns intended.
We went home with a small bag of this one, and I purchased it for my mom so that she could try it, and we want to see if it has like any healing benefits to the gut. He said it's very good for gut health. It's kind of like a probiotic.
Yeah.
So we'll see if it's the last one. I call it smoky barbecue. It has a smoky flavor.
It really does. Well, here's how I describe it. First of all, it smells like a live fire. And if the oolong smelled like the aftermath of a fire, like if you came up and smelled the coals the day after the fire, this tea, what is it called?
I call it smoky barbecue. They called it smoky yellowtail or something.
I think it was maybe called like a smoky yellow tea. This tea tasted like a roaring, burning, raging fire that's currently happening.
Yeah, I like it. Now, this was Leo's least favorite, and I don't even think that this particular tea was scheduled to be in the lineup, but because the conversation was flowing so nicely, he said, I'm going to give you guys a bonus tea. I do not care for this. He said, but this entire town, the province that he purchased it in, they drink it day and night, all throughout the day. And he said, what is it about this? It has to be something to this tea.
Well, he actually said that he didn't like it at first, but then he kept forcing himself to drink it, and then eventually he came to like it. And it is a very strong and unique taste, so I don't blame people for being off-putted at first. Is it like a little bit soury, kind of?
I didn't pick that up.
No?
I could just...
Taste the fire?
Yeah, reminds me of the South. Barbecue, cookouts.
Yeah, it tastes like a barbecue.
Fire. Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was good, but it did not make it home with us.
Yeah, and just going back on how tea is a cultural event, he would tell us that he would go to these tea farms and he would stay up all night with the people there drinking tea. In America, you might stay up all night partying and drinking alcohol and stuff like that, and he is drinking tea all night in China. So something happened during the middle of our tea experience. An earthquake occurred right as we were drinking the tea and shook all of our chairs. It was a 3.8 magnitude earthquake here in Las Vegas. And it felt like when you're driving on the highway and a big truck whooshes by you in the other direction and your car does this kind of move and wobble to the side. That's what it felt like. And that was very interesting to have that in the middle of this tea experience when the caffeine and the vibes from all the tea is hitting us and we're kind of feeling elevated and in this kind of cloudy but yet clear, pleasant headspace. To feel that earthquake was quite a moment. And he didn't even feel it himself. But what did that earthquake mean to you or feel like for you, Rosie?
Yeah, so I mean, I think everyone who was there, and it was just 5 of us at the table, it meant something spiritual. I think maybe it's just me. I always take it to a spiritual place, but I think it was very significant. Perhaps it's earmarking something for all of us individually, like an awakening or a shifting has happened, if only at the subconscious level. So each of us independently have our own lives and different interests and goals and such. So I think that's what it was, like it's pointing a finger. I don't think we have the exact answer yet. I think today was just like a door opening. I've been here almost 3 years in Las Vegas. I've never experienced an earthquake. And then going up to Urinton, of course, they were happening back to back since the end of February. So I think there's something, happening right now in the area that's going to be profound for us because we experienced it directly. So for it to happen during a sacred ceremony, it has to mean something spiritual. I think that's what I think.
Yeah, it was cool. It was definitely a vibe. And I'm going to leave it open to interpretation at this point. But maybe just a exclamation mark on the time and the experience. And now we're going to talk about lessons that we learned from the tea experience today. And I want to discuss one. This man has spent over 10 years becoming a master in one thing, tea. He takes 60-day trips to China frequently to find these special tea farms that don't do any marketing because they don't need to, because they have all the customers they could ever want and then some. And he befriends them, speaks the language, does detective work, and he is on a mission to find the best, highest quality teas in all of China and then bringing them back to America to sell in his store. And he's obsessed with it. And something as simple as tea has been in my life, which has always been an afterthought. Sure, I'll have a little tea. Yeah, honey, put it in the cup. I'll drink it. No problem. To realize how deep and complex and culturally significant, spiritually significant, just the vastness of the tea industry reminded me of how almost every product, topic, field of study in this world can get extremely deep and complex. And we only have time to master one or maybe two in this lifetime. For instance, we tried a great olive oil store the other day, and we didn't even realize that like high quality olive oil is a totally different experience than what you get over the counter. When you get high quality olive oil, it's almost spicy and earthy, and it's a totally different thing than what you get, at the counter at Smith's or any other grocery store. So many different areas in this world there are to be mastered, so you need to pick and choose which one really speaks to you and focus your time in that. And it's tough to say, you know what, I'm not going to be able to do everything, and you have to let some things go by the wayside. And I think it's safe to say I don't think I'll become a tea master at this point.
Yeah,
Rosie?
For sure. I definitely took away, I'm just over here reading through my notes. What struck me was that Leo said, this is my alchemy. If I can spend the rest of my life finding and still kind of like sorting through the teas in China, then he can say that this in this lifetime is his alchemy and it means the most. Also, he said, I don't call myself a tea master. He said, I don't want to be associated with anyone else out here pretending to be something that they're not. Because if they say, oh, come over here, drink my tea, this is the best tea. He said, no, I always face it with skepticism. If they're quick to tell me it's organic, it probably isn't. He questions every single thing. And I think that's super important because he wants to make sure that his product is premium.
He vigilantly stays humble, and it's like there's a well-known theory that as you start becoming an expert in something and as you start to learn more about a particular topic, you learn how much there is that you don't know. So he stays humble and he stays a student and he wants to learn as much as he can about the tea world, and he says his dream of mastery will never be complete and that he's just going to keep going and getting better and better, and he distrusts those that say, I'm the tea master expert and I know everything there is to know about tea, because it's a never-ending journey of learning. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in to our tea experience episode. Y'all have a good one.
Bye.